Hello everyone and welcome to episode 69 of Podcast vs. Enemies, a Destiny Massive Breakdown show. My name is Court and joining me is just Saint this episode. Impetus is away for the 4th of July holidays this weekend, but speaking of absolute bangers, we've got another set of 8 weapons from this season's revamped raid loot pool. Before we get to that, Saint, what have you been up to?
It's honestly been a pretty sparse week in Destiny for me. I've been doing some weeklies, got to get that one Last Wish run in for a week, which we're talking about today. I've just kind of finished the last couple of weapons there and the patterns. Playing through the seasonal story. Seasonal story continues to deliver hits week after week. I think a lot of people saw the plot point of this week coming for a little while now, but Savathûn is back on the menu, and that is kind of where we're probably going to leave this season, and I think this is probably like the last story beat for this season, but they done a pretty strong one that I think a lot of people are excited about. The reactions within the world of Destiny, all the characters were mixed, to say the least, about bringing Savathûn back, but I really enjoy that. I've been looking forward to that. But other than that, I've been out of town for job interview, looking at some places to live, stuff like that. So just a lot of IRL stuff going on, which we'll talk about PvE schedule and all of that in just a second. But Court, how about you, man? What have you been up to?
Again, not much for me on game anyway. We did do a PsyOps Moon Battleground, and that is certainly a Grandmaster in this game. It is, it's a doozy, we'll say. Impetus did leave a little comment here for this week saying that he ran... Well, that's not true. He didn't run exactly one. He ran a failed attempt and then I jumped in to help out, and that was the successful attempt. One Moon Battleground GM with myself and Noah, one of the patrons. It took us about 35 minutes. It is a great challenge for experienced players, but it's terrible for farming Nightfall weapons. I think that's the general complaint when it comes to these kind of revamped strikes. Mm-hmm. I am personally really enjoying the challenge. Like, I enjoyed every part of that Moon Battleground, but to actually farm the Nightfall weapons is the big kind of sticking point. And considering they haven't been, they haven't been absolutely terrible, but they're not like juicers. Like, if this was Hothead week, then it would be like, I don't know. I'm just going to wait till another time when I can farm it. For this week it was, or for that week, it was for the Braytech Osprey rocket launcher, which I know we spoke about the last episode. And a lot of folks have been kind of wondering, cluster bomb with a damage perk or whatever. So a lot of folks were after it. There is some kind of minor bugs related to the Grandmaster variant for the Moon Battleground, so hopefully they'll get ironed out. It's related to like killing certain things before you kill another certain thing. It just, the way the trigger points happen, I think it's just leading to some misfortunes. Impetus also wrote here that he got his Navigator Catalyst and got Michael's Reverence crafted. And back to me, outside the game, I've been playing a lot of DMZ. Shout out to Supremacy, JK, and Noah. They dropped in for a few sessions the other night. That was a lot of fun.
We get some operators amongst the patrons?
Absolutely did, yes. Yeah. Surprisingly enough, yeah. I honestly think DMZ is one of the highlights of at least the last 10 months at this point now, that's come out of a Call of Duty game. So if you are interested in playing around with Marathon whenever that gets released, I would certainly start playing some of these extraction shooters. We don't know what the extent of Marathon is going to be like when it comes to an extraction shooter, but I think DMZ is a nice kind of healthy balance of, there's PvP in there, there's PvE, and there's like your kind of self-challenge, and that's what I really enjoy about those type of franchises that give you that. There's no end goal, there's technically no like success win goal. I suppose exfiltrating successfully is the end goal here, but between infiltrating and exfiltrating, it's entirely up to you, whatever you want to do, and there's plenty of challenges, there's plenty of things to do. So yeah, that's my big thumbs up to DMZ, and yeah, we'll see you on the, well, it's 6 maps that DMZ have. It's quite bonkers. But anyway, back. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, I think that is a good. Anybody that's like never done that, is interested in Marathon, just download and jump in and play a few matches, like you said, because it is a great way to get at least an idea, kind of what is like, any kind of reference point for that game if you've never played it. And yeah, there's a lot of good memories to be had in DMZ if you start pushing yourselves. I remember doing missions like the Whale, where you have to have like an obscene amount of cash on a single player and extract it, and it just things like that kind of push you into some chaos and things like that, which is a lot of fun. But yeah, now back to our regularly scheduled Destiny programming, right? We of course want to thank everybody that helps keep Massive Breakdowns going week after week. The sponsors we want to shout out first and foremost: A Modern Viking, Askian Monk, Bryce Aroni, Deacon, I'm Kate Rose, Moonlight, Shazzle, and This Moment. As a reminder, you can send us all kinds of feedback, direct you to our socials, Destiny Massive Breakdown on Twitter. We're all there on Twitter. We're all in the Discord server on Massive Breakdowns. Positive, critical, constructive feedback helps the trajectory of the podcast, how we present all kinds of information in our builds, go through activities, the PvE sandbox. And we also want to send a special thanks and appreciation to everybody that supports PvE across the board, just downloading and listening each week, tuning in, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, whatever it may be, hanging out in the Discord server, talking about the builds that they've been trying out, or feedback, perks that they think were underrating, all kinds of stuff like that. We always love to talk about PvE. Speaking of Patreon, if you would like to support the show, you can visit DestinyMassiveBreakdowns.com. Click on the link to Patreon. You'll get access to members-only channels in the Discord, some behind-the-scenes info, input on the show, and access to the legendary annual merch drop. All right, we've got one thing and one thing only that we're talking about in this week's episode. Court, what are we getting into?
Well, this week we are talking about Last Wish. The weapons breakdown segment is the big bonanza. We're not going to be talking about Last Wish, the raid. We'll probably give our kind of general thoughts with Last Wish at some other future point. So we're not doing a breakdown of Last Wish, because, fairly old legacy content at this point, but it's still one of those really great raids to go into, and whether it's just doing a full run or if it's just doing a farming session, by the time this episode comes out, it will be the weekly featured raid, so you can go in and farm those weapons to your heart's content. In terms of housekeeping and just a little kind of update section, we've got 2 points here. So Saint mentioned just a few moments ago, when it comes to our scheduling for Podcast versus Enemies, Impetus and Saint will be absent for a few episodes during the end of July and sort of beginning of August. We're still looking at working at the exact dates here, but we may skip a week or two, just to kind of see where things are at. We're just looking at the schedule before we start the podcast this week. We've got, I think, next week's episode pretty much penciled in, but the rest of the weeks we're not too sure where we can kind of put whatever we want when it comes to a variety of topics. However, I may do a solo episode if these guys are away, and maybe bring in a guest or two. Again, this is all just kind of planning, pre-planning. We'll see how things line up. In terms of Destiny Massive Breakdowns, the podcast, there is a big kind of featured news related to our sibling podcast. Saint was on with Lego LaFlash to discuss the future of the show, on top of some sort of the best traits for PvP and PvE. I don't think we want to kind of spoil the news here, so please make sure to go listen to episode 301 for that big news related to the future of Destiny Massive Breakdowns. Yeah,
it was great to do an episode. Like you said, don't want to get into it too much, but I did really enjoy the conversation with Lego, kind of about best traits in the game, and finding ones that meet that sweet spot of viable, valuable in the Crucible, and viable and valuable, in your raids and dungeons. So some really interesting conversation there, and definitely some stuff that I would not have thought of as a predominantly PvE player. Yeah, definitely go listen to 301.
Cool. Well, let's get cracking with our Last Wish weapons breakdown. Just as a big overview reminder here, all of these are craftable, and if you aren't aware, Hawthorne has a weekly mission that gives a guaranteed red box per account, plus you have the chance of a red box for each encounter. Like I said, this episode will go out when Last Wish is the featured raid, and you can farm each encounter. Last Wish does not have a typical loot pool system in place. This means every weapon and armor drop in every encounter. So we do recommend Kali for farming, plus the additional encounter challenge, which is pretty fairly easy to implement during these runs as well. And it's one of the fastest farms that you can do. Get those really high burst weapons out, and just vibe out with your friends, your clanmates. In regards to the weapons here, we do have a new origin trait. The testing for these are still we're still trying to get some numbers out of these, so we don't have the exact specific numbers. But for when it comes to Explosive Pact, on grenade ability usage, you gain the following: increased stability and reload speed for 7.5 seconds. This does stack multiple times, increasing these effects. Healing grenades and grenade kills grant multiple stacks, and like I said, we're still looking at the sort of individual numbers here, but I've heard they're fairly above average when it comes to, I think, especially 2 times stacks.
Yeah.
So nice little kind of thing if you're being offensive with your grenades. Kind of a lot of builds that play into demolitionist builds. You're going to obviously play into Explosive Pact. We do have a few weapons in this list that have demo, so that's a nice little kind of synergy there. And just a quick reminder before I pass it over to Saint, enhancing a crafted intrinsic gives the main stat plus 10 and plus 2 to the rest. Adept weapons, of which Last Wish weapons do not have any adept variants, they're fully masterwork, gives the main stack plus 10 and then plus 3 to the rest. And when I say the rest, I mean the sort of the primary main perks, like range, stability, handling, and reload speed. Those are the sort of the main ones when it comes to these weapons. Alright, starting with kinetics, we have Chattering Bone. Saint.
Yeah, Chattering Bone is it's looking pretty solid. So it is a lightweight frame, 450 RPM. As you know, lightweights are giving you those plus 20 points of mobility, 2 tiers here, and about 6.25% to your overall forward movement speed. So nice little mobility bump there, and the stats are really looking solid on this thing. When we are comparing it, we're pretty much comparing it to Battle Scar, which is a world drop, same kinetic, lightweight frame pulse rifle, and it's been around for. I guess this would be the second season now that Battle Scar's been around. So you've probably got a few of these in your vault, but it's not much for the competition for Chattering Bone. This thing has got 33 range versus 28 on a Battle Scar, 52 stability versus a 54, 70 handling versus 66, 63 reload versus 56, 71 aim assist versus 67 on Battle Scar, and then 57 recoil direction, which doesn't sound a lot, but that's actually still better with Battle Scar at 54. So, I mean, this thing is just superior stats across the board, which, if you pay a lot of attention to these loot pools and things like that, seeing the raid weapons, even older ones, having superior to the world loot pool stats, is no shocker. But man, does this thing really handedly beat out Battle Scar. And I think that you can even, we'll first talk about the barrels and mags, but I think you can take it even further than what Battle Scar has to offer. When we're looking at barrels and mags to kind of just pump our stats up here, we're looking at maybe some weaknesses of this thing. Definitely going to be taking Arrowhead Break. While it doesn't super need the handling at a base of 70, it definitely could use that recoil direction bump going up from 57 to 87. And then on the barrel sides, you pretty much got just two ways you want to roll this. If you want to go accurize rounds to push that range out, when you're aimed down sights, you're getting about an extra, little meter and a quarter on the range from 31.4 to about 32.67. So, pretty decent bump there on the range points. No waste there. And then, we always have flared Magwell. Plus 5 stability isn't anything that we would or would not really be targeting here, but that plus 15 reload speed is going to be incredibly valuable, depending on what traits we're landing in the main columns. And things kind of just keep going here with Keep Away, Discord, Rapid Hit, and Kill Clip in the 3rd column. And in the 4th column, we've got Focus Fury, Rampage, and Kinetic Tremors. Court, I think that there's a classic here. Maybe there's a few different ways this could go. What are you going to be targeting on our first weapon here, the Chattering Bone Pulse Rifle?
So Chris talked about in the past where they'd be keeping like legacy perk combinations. Here we have Kill Clip and Rampage. Obviously, I think the big one, Kindled Orchid from that particular season that escapes me, Season of the Forge. That was the big kind of... I always kept thinking that whenever he mentioned that they'll keep the legacy kind of classic pairings. But we do have that here. We've got Kill Clip and Rampage. That is your typical double stacking perk. They stack absolutely fine. So if you want that 25% increase after a reload plus 33.1% after getting 3 kills, go ham. Let me have a look at the numbers here. It's 1.25 times 1.3. So yeah, that's 66.25% damage increase, which is crazy. Might help with the sort of general kind of, lightweight pulses are fairly, they're not hitting a lot. 27 impact, that's your base impact. So, but in terms of kind of other perks, because this is a lightweight pulse rifle, I've not really looked at this a ton. Maybe like something like Keep Away just to really ramp up those stats. Like brings with the Arrowhead plus Accurized plus Keep Away active, your range goes up to 53, which brings it up to almost 34 fall off, which is pretty nuts considering. Pair that with maybe Kinetic Tremors if you're into the sort of whole kinetic buff aspect. We've talked about this before. With pulse rifles, it does require 12, which isn't a lot when it comes to pulse rifle. That is just 4 triggers. In terms of other things, like the rest, like high impact reserves, I've never really seen much value in PvE. Elemental capacitor, it's really down to whatever subclass you're choosing, but I think that's more akin to PvP sandbox. Yeah. Focus Fury, not. I mean, I put Focus Fury in this in script here, but I'm not with it. With a pulse rifle, you really need to look at your stability and really hone in on your recoil direction if you want to guarantee those precision damage shots. Because if you don't hit those precision damage shots, there's no point using Focus Fury.
Especially when you have so many other damage options here. Like Focus Fury, I just don't see the value,
I was going to say I play on keyboard and mouse. I haven't used the controller on Destiny for many, many years now, so this might be a little bit different. But even on keyboard and mouse, I don't see the value of Focus Fury because I will immediately spec into range rather than stability because I can kind of offset the stability hit. When it comes to keyboard and mouse, there's more of a 3D movement aspect when you're on keyboard and mouse. On controller, you might have to play into the stability card. So I suppose our kind of recommendation here with Accurized rounds and Arrowhead are kind of focused on keyboard and mouse. But yeah, so for me, I think Keep Away and either Kinetic Tremors or even something like Head's Seeker. Harmony, if I'm doing like a kind of swap builds, those are the sort of combinations that I'm looking out for. The kill clip and rampage roll is certainly something that I want to craft and enhance, because they're quite old perks now at this point. They're year one perks. It's always funny to see them drop in these perk pools. Saint, do you have any kind of combinations that you're looking towards?
Yeah, this is, it's funny you say that, because it's like, as a hoarder, there are some benefits, being that I still have one of these actually in my vault, with Rampage. And
you better get that deleted before Impetus hears this episode.
I just got to get my count down a little bit, probably, but I think that when we have talked about kinetic tremors as a trait and where it works well and where it doesn't, where it maybe has struggled to have much of an appeal on a hand cannon, I definitely do see more of the appeal here, given that, let's say you put on tac mag, you've got 36 bullets in the magazine, and it's only taken 12. It's only taken a third of that to proc kinetic tremors, and I get that out pretty quick with this being a rapid fire. A lightweight frame with a pretty high RPM. I think kinetic tremors and keep away definitely has some appeal. Keep away in general, I don't think is a perk that we've recommended a ton in PvE, but it's pretty solid. 10 range, 30 reload, and a little bit of an accuracy and cone buff. Can't deny that is a solid set of buffs for a activator, pretty much just being as far away as you should be if you're going to be engaging enemies with a weapon like this. The double damage here is a novelty for sure. I'm not huge on kill clip, unless I'm using something like we talked about, like the grenade, the wave frame from the dungeon. I think it was more appeal to kill clip on that, because I have to reload anyways, and I'm going to be required to reload no matter what. Versus a pulse rifle, it just seems a little tedious, I would say. So I'm definitely with you on the keep away, or even maybe Discord in Rampage if you're going for some kind of like an ad clear type of maneuver there. High impact reserves, gotta have some other perk that's gonna allow me to stay in that zone for a little bit longer. Whether that is triple tap 4 times, rewind, anything of that nature. Like, I just gotta have something that's gonna allow me to get a little bit more out of high impact reserves, kind of consistently. But honestly, that's about all I got for Chattering Bone. Solid, rapid fire pulses are in pretty decent spot since our big primary shakeup a little while back. I think that adaptive still take the cake for like best damage output pulse rifle, but pretty solid. All right, let's keep it going with the kinetics here. Court, what do we got next?
We have Transfiguration, which is the kinetic high impact scout rifle. That is 150 RPM. That frame bonus is while stationary or moving at or below 2.8 meters per second and aiming down sights gains minus 20% accuracy cone size and minus 17% accuracy cone growth. Basically, you will be able to hit easier is the sort of layman terms here when it comes to that frame bonus. So its stats versus its peers, we're kind of looking this at the Scholar, Talons of the Eagle, and Guiding Sight. So pretty kind of older kinetics here. Transfiguration appears to be the only obtainable kinetic high impact scout, so honestly not much competition. And this is kind of true for a lot of the weapons in this week's episode. There's a lot of these weapons were made and we've not really had much competition since, so it's nice that we've had a revamp of these weapons, because they kind of by default are number one. We have 74 I'm looking at impact here. Sorry, range is 74, which means it's best in class by 6 points. 22 stability, which is third overall with Scholar at 32. 29 handling, which is second with Scholar at 30. 25 reload, which is worst with Guiding Sight at 30. And overall the pretty solid stat package, save for low reload speed. When it comes to barrels and magazines, for barrels we're probably going to look at Fluted Barrel, just to give that +5 and +15 handling. Again, because I'm quite keen on range rather than stability, with this being a high impact, it's probably not really necessary for me to spec into stability as much. I would maybe go down small bore if you want that +7 to each. Otherwise, it's hammer forged rifling with that +10 brings it up to 84. You could go full bore as well if you really want that -10 and -5 to stability and handling respectively. That brings range up to 89. So we're talking almost full 100 range here with the stat package, and just looking at the damage fall off, we're looking at 91.73 meters if you're aiming down sight. So it's pretty, we're talking quite a large play space before things start falling off. Yeah. When it comes to the magazine, either tac mag or flared mag will. Tac mag does give you a slight bump to the magazine. You do get 10 reload speed and a little bit of stability. A flared mag will is that +15 reload speed and +5 stability. I think it's more the perks that were pretty much more interested compared to the barrels of magazines. Mm-hmm. Quite an interesting selection here. I do see demo, so here's another, here's the first with demo as a perk, which could be synergized with the origin trait. Rapid hit is here. Discord, I know we've not talked a lot much about Discord, but it does have some unique interactions when it comes to primaries weapons. While Discord is active, fully refill the magazine of primary weapons, and it does grant for 7 seconds that kind of 25% ADS animation duration. Basically, you'll ADS faster by 25%. 25% decrease accuracy code size, and a little bit of airborne effectiveness. Keep away here. I think this is more relevant compared to Shattering Bone, just because you will be at much longer distance than 15 meters. And yeah, we've got rewind rounds here, which will another thing that we'll be covering a lot with these weapons. Rewind rounds makes a lot of appearances with these revamped perk pools. But we also have, just like Shattering Bone, but it's flipped around, we've got Rampage in the 3rd slot and Kill Clip in the 4th. Mm-hmm. For damage perks, Explosive Payload. I know we've been looking for Explosive Payload kind of scout rifles for a while. That is back in column 4. I mentioned Kill Clip. Adrenaline Junkie, if you want to pair that with Demo. And Kinetic Tremors is here again. You only require 6 shots with scout rifles, as a reminder, for Kinetic Tremors to kick off. So yeah, some very interesting combinations here. Saint, what are you looking out for?
Now, this is where I get the demo AJ right off the bat. Really fits in nice with Explosive Pact. Even when your grenade is unactivated, you're still getting some seemingly pretty solid bumps to your reload speed with a stack or two. Throwing that grenade, reloading your weapon, getting a grenade kill, being able to put down more damage. There's a really appealing loop there, but I think this may be one of the situations where I'm going in for the double damage perk. I'm going for Rampage, and I'm going for Explosive Payload. The amount of damage you can output is honestly crazy, and I think that I prefer this one over, or like the reason I would go for this over like the Chattering Bone double damage combo is because Rampage is like a little bit of an easier like background perk, right? Just using Explosive Payload, using Rampage together. Explosive Payload's going to give you, around 10 to 15% kind of depending exactly where, if you're landing crits to the enemy and some stuff like that, but it's a solid, small bump to your damage constantly. And then you have up to that 33% increase from Rampage. And this isn't quite the Fatebringer with Frenzy and Explosive Payload. That is like maybe even nicer because it can just activate outright. And it could also be pretty hot with those upcoming hand cannon changes. But I feel like the Rampage Explosive Payload here is really... it's just going to feel really solid. And I'm that's what I'm going to be crafting on mine once I finish getting this thing leveled up. Court, what are you putting in your Transfiguration?
Well, funny that you mentioned that about Rampage and Explosive Payload. That's probably what I'm also going to go for, because I was looking at the damage profile with D2 Foundry. D2 Foundry's got a little drop-down menu when it comes to specific encounters. I've put it to Grandmaster Nightfall and the enemy type. Probably going to be using this most on our miners. That's your rank and file enemy type. I've got Rampage up to ×3. I've got Explosive Payload active. The base number, or for body shot anyway, is 2800, and the critical hit is 4914. If you apply both Explosive Payload and Rampage ×3, the body shot goes up to 4286, and the crit is 7100. So both body shots around about 53% increase, and the critical hit is 44%, 44.5%. So yeah, that is a very high damage. And again, because I think the whole kind of highlight here when it comes to Transfiguration is you're not going to be using this really aggressively. It's more of a longer range scout rifle. It's almost like a mini sniper rifle at this point, with the kind of damage potency when the amount of damage that you can output here. So yeah, that's a nice little kind of pairing with Transfiguration, and that's probably what I'm going to go for. Otherwise, I think it might have been another getaway that does almost maximize my range up to 99. Reload speed goes up to 70. That's if I've got full bore equipped to get that 99 range, and either explosive payloads or kinetic tremors. But I think we've already got a fair number of kinetic weapons that can do kinetic tremors more efficiently compared to Transfiguration. So yeah, Rampage and Explosive Payload is a very good shout. But to be honest, there's some really great combos here. If you don't already have a demo plus AG scout rifle, this is another one to if you craft 2 or 3 to get these perk combos. I think scout rifles are in a generally good place, and I know people want them to be a lot more, the damage to be a lot more, but we've heard from Chris on these episodes on the podcast when it comes to more safe options, they're not really that inclined to increase the damage. And we've talked a lot about sniper rifles, and we know we're getting a small buff to them at some point in the future. But scout rifles, yeah, they're not going to go too far with them because they are a pretty safe option. And we do get some really great champion mods every other season.
I was going to say, pretty frequently on the scouts, right? I feel like.
Yeah. Explosive Payload is a really great one when it comes to barriers and unstoppables. Overloads, I don't think we've had Overload for a while. Actually, Overload Scouts this season, isn't it?
Yeah, first time in a bit.
So Overload Scout is Explosive Payload is pretty good for Overload because you do that double damage to really lock down an Overload champion.
Yeah, it's constant ticking, right? So you're getting those like kind of half-second ticks in there, and plus at least we forget Explosive Payload is effectively pushing out that damage range because that explosive piece has no range fall off. So hey, if 90 ish meters wasn't enough, let's push it out even further. Explosive Payload, why not? And that will definitely. You stack up those Rampage sacks on that thing with Explosive Payload, and it's going to be feeling like an old scout rifle. Pretty quick.
So with so for the enhanced intrinsic, probably go for reload here.
Yeah.
Just looking at so with the perk combo setup, so I've still got full bore on, I've got flared magwell, I've got Rampage and Explosive Payload, brings it out to 91 range, reload speed of 50, and you get the plus 2 to range, handling and stability as a nice little bump as well. So yeah, really great scout rifle. I'm personally not into scout rifles. I think I prefer more pulse rifles in comparison, but this is definitely one that I'll be like, okay, I don't currently have Transfiguration crafted yet, but I will get some rolls crafted as soon as it does drop.
Yeah, Also, hey, that explosive payload enhance is given +5 reload. Just a little more on top. Why not, you know?
All right, we have our last kinetic, and it is a special. So we have the Supremacy. Saint, take it away.
The Supremacy is a kinetic rapid-fire sniper rifle, 140 RPM, deeper ammo reserves, 20% faster reload when that mag is empty. This is the only kinetic rapid-fire. So, you know, kind of comparisons, Praetus Revenge. Or the only, I should say the only competitor is Impetus Revenge for comparison here, to be clear. This is kind of, you know, at a little bit of a disadvantage because we're pre-origin trait, and they have done so, you know, looking through these weapons, they generally don't compare kinetic versus energies, but, you know, for the sake of this conversation, we're gonna shake it up a little bit. The Stasis, a distant pull sniper rifle, will also be included here. So we've got Supremacy and Impetus Revenge, which are really the only two kind of kinetics here that stand up to each other. But we'll also talk a little bit about distant pull, the Stasis one from the current season. So starting off with 32 range is kind of in the middle, distant pull with 30 and Impetus with 34. 38 stability, again in the middle, with distant pull at 35 and Praetor's Revenge at 40. You see a little bit of a trend here, and then same thing continues with handling, distant pull at 65, Praetor's Revenge at 70, 68 handling is where the Supremacy is going to land. And then just below Praetor's Revenge by 1 point on the reload, 62 versus 63. And then same thing, just a single point on aim assist from 78 to 77 points on the Supremacy. 40 zoom versus 35 on Praetor's Revenge and 49 on distant pull. Personally, I prefer the slightly lower zoom. I know this is you know, there's all kinds of preference here, so that hard to say this like definitively the best. And then 60 recoil direction is going to be the best in the group. So kind of in the average zone, honestly, as far as the stats go. It is a little bit older than Praetor's Revenge by a little while. You know, Praetor's also is another raid weapon, so they're like kind of right neck and neck. Not surprising to hear that it's just a little bit newer. Praetor's Revenge is going to just beat it out slightly, but we're not going to really hold it against it because it kind of wins us back a little bit when it comes to our main traits. Honestly, the barrel, I'm not going to be super picky. I may go small bore, I think, if I'm just going to throw one out, because I'm getting a little bit of extra range and I'm getting a little bit of extra stability, taking me up from 38 to 45 on the stability, which is nice, helping you just land those consistent shots. And if there's anything that you're going to be needing to do with the Supremacy, it is land a lot of consistent shots. Up next, we have appended mag on the magazine size. Not really any reason to mess with extended mag here. Like same, you know, kind of same bonus in the mag and just more negatives. So not really interested in the reload speed, 20-point negation there on extended mag. Would much rather just take appended mag option and enjoy the mag size increase without the negatives. Now we're getting into why we are going to be landing a lot of shots really quick. In column 3, we've got rewind rounds, lead from gold, discord, and rapid hit. And then in column 4, we have 4 times the charm, focus fire, bait, and switch. There is there are a couple things that jump out to me from the damage point, but I think that there is one role we first saw from maybe it was Sneaky Beaver who was doing a showcase on this. I can't remember exactly who it was off the top of my head, but Court, how are we going to just be putting an obscene amount of ammo downrange with this thing?
You are correct. It was Sneaky Beaver. I just looked back on our chat logs here. Yes. So the tagline here is approximately 420 consecutive Supremacy shots, and this was versus Orc. So, you know, you've got a fairly large damage window, and because this is a rapid fire, you're going to be putting a lot of damage down range. Yes, the pairing between rewind rounds and 4 times the charm is very unique because the way both are working, rewind rounds, if you aren't familiar, we've covered this before, but just as a quick reminder, it will refill up to 60% of the magazine of the hits landed into the magazine from reserves, and it always rounds up. So requires firing 28.5% of the magazine capacity for the refill to activate. Always rounds up. And hits after triggering a refill do not count until the buff text appears. Pair that with fourth time's the charm, which doesn't bring ammo from the reserves. It just gives you ammo. So scoring 4 precision hits refunds 2 ammo to the magazine, and the precision hit counter is reset if no precision hits are scored within 2 seconds. So fourth time's the charm is doing a lot of the heavy lifting here, which is where it's how this is possible, because every time you hit those 4 shots, you get 2 ammo back, and then rewind rounds will trigger after that set amount of time as well, and it'll just keep infinitely looping with each other. I've never seen the magazine go completely flat. I've never seen being able to completely expend all the ammunition. The clip and the videos that we've seen, it's pretty much endless, providing you keep those precision shots on the go. But it is a remarkable pairing. It's something I've never seen before. We got fairly close a while back with Thoughtless, because I remember I did the big breakdown for Thoughtless, which is the stasis rapid fire from Season of the Risen. We got fairly close with the kind of damage potential there, where you don't really need to reload. It's all happening due to the combination of overflow plus focused fury. But this one is a very interesting one as a pairing. If you don't want to go down the meme build, to be honest, I don't want to call it a meme build, because it isn't. It is pretty
It's
potent.
effective. Yeah.
Yes. If you don't want to go down that route, I would probably just go for the classic of Lead from Gold. And to be honest, Bait and Switch is a very interesting perk to see here, and it remains to be seen how snipers perform in the future. Bait and Switch being 35% for 10 seconds after doing that kind of juggling between your kinetic and your special, or your energy weapon and your heavy weapon. But 35% is nothing to kind of sniff at, really, to be honest. That's, if I pair... Oh, I've clicked off Bait and Switch. So again, if I go to let's do Grandmaster Nightfall as the activity, and we'll do, instead of minor, we'll do a boss. So without Bait and Switch, the damage profile is body shot and crit is 4,500, and the crit's 14 or almost 15,000. Bait and Switch active brings it up to 6,000 for body shot and 20,000 for the crit. So yeah, just a nice clean 35% damage buff, but that's quite a lot of damage, and I think rapid fire snipers are performing fairly well now after having 2 separate buffs. Their ammo reserve capacity plus the general sniper rifle kind of buff as well. But yeah, I honestly probably will just craft the rewind rounds and fourth time's the charm pairing, because it's such a unique one. And just like you saying, I also like to flood my vault with very interesting pairings, even if I don't use them a lot.
It's good.
Any last thoughts here about Supremacy?
You know, I think that as we just keep seeing these sniper buffs, I don't know if I would say the snipers are in the meta, but weapons like this, where you keep having these really interesting rules, are kind of, you know, they're pushing into that usable range. They're pushing into a viable type of space, you know, which I don't think is something that we've seen from sniper rifles for a long time. So we keep seeing these buffs. We keep seeing some interesting roles come up. It's nice to see snipers regaining at least a small footing, even if it's just a couple of them with a couple roles in the PvE scene.
It's nice seeing Bait and Switch on different weapons as well, because I think when you think of Bait and Switch, it's pretty synonymous with a certain LFR, which is, well, it's not completely nerfed, but it's not as potent as before. Bait and Switch, the whole pairing here, and just again, reminder that you can craft these, and the increase to you can enhance these perks, and the increase to Bait and Switch is a +1 second increase, and then the refill ratio of rewind rounds is an additive 10%. For 4th times the charm, it's also a +1 second, but it's not really relevant as long as you're just kind of hitting those crits. And yeah, very interesting pairings here. Yeah, let's move over to the energy slots. We do have a certain Void All Rifle. I'll kick us off with the sort of overview here. So it's age-old bond, and like I think we've been requesting for Void Auto Rifles for a while, and this season they dropped 3, 4. But yes, age-old bond. It is the Void High Impact Auto Rifle. That's a 360 RPM. The frame bonus, just like Transfiguration, is when stationary or moving at or below 2.8 meters per second and aiming down sights, you gain the -20% accuracy cone size and -17% accuracy cone growth. Again, you'll hit your targets more easier than say if you didn't have that or frame bonus. We only have one comparison to make here, and it's 15 months old now. It's Come to Pass, which is the Arc High Impact. That's the Throne World drop. So we've got 82 range versus its 78, 40 stability versus Come to Pass's 26, 33 handling versus 31, 34 reload, which is actually the same, 61 aim assist, which is versus 54, and 89 recoil versus 83. So it beats out in the stat department, plus that huge range with age-old bond. Does have some really good perks in comparison too. I will say Come to Pass is the only one out of the two that has the classic sofa roll, which I know we recommended all those episodes ago. We haven't seen that pairing for a while. We do have stats for all in Age of Bond, but sadly no one for all. But well, I'm jumping the gun here. Let's talk about the perks and the magazine. So for perks, really, again, a lot of personal preference here. With this being a high impact, it's going to have a large range, quite a substantial range versus its stability. So as I've mentioned a couple of times in this episode already, I value range over stability, and because this is a fairly lower RPM weapon, the sort of ratio between how much shots you're outputting versus the stability and the recoil direction it's not as kind of prominent as opposed to, say, a faster fire rate auto rifle. But for me, I'd probably go for polygonal rifling, which brings up the stability by 10, or chambered compensator, which is that's at +10 stability and +10 recoil direction. So it really just closes out the recoil direction a little bit more and gives you that +10 stability. You do get that -5 in handling. When it comes to magazines, again, I'm not really, I don't have much to offer here other than, say, Tac Mag, which is your plus a little bit more in the magazine, +10 reload speed, +5 stability, or you can go Flared Magwell, which is your +15 reload speed and +5 stability. The perks are the ones that I'm a lot more interested in as for recommending. We do have a really great perk if you're on console here. We've got dynamic sway reduction. We've mentioned this a few episodes through the sort of span of the podcast. DSR isn't as important to me as a keyboard and mouse user, but it is for a console user. If you're using a controller, this does help out a lot. The kind of comparison between not having DSR and having it is quite potent. But if you're not interested in having DSR, we do have a Discord here. Again, we've got Dragonfly, which is one of the sort of classic perks from before. Repulsor Brace is in the 3rd column, and we do have stats for all. In the 4th column, we've got Collective Action. We have Destabilizing Rounds. Kill Clip is here as well. And we also have Target Lock. Saint, what are you feeling here? What's the perks that you're kind of, what's jumping out to you?
So my initial thought was Repulsor Brace Destabilizing Rounds. This season was the first time we got this on any primary weapons, and I think this is only one of two with positive outlook, I believe, being able to get the same roll. But Repulsor Brace and Destabilizing Rounds is really interesting. As somebody who I play a lot of Void Titan, this really plays well into that offensive bulwark kit. But I think The kind of interesting part here is if I really value destabilizing rounds that much more over just using Echo of Instability, it's allowing me to get volatile rounds on my weapon. I don't know if this has as much value there because I'm just using it directly on that subclass. Obviously, if you're not using it on that subclass, there's a little bit more value there. But then, again, personally, I'm using this so I can capitalize on that offensive bulwark all the time. I get that this is still a pretty strong defensive weapon. I think that other than that, the role that I've been having the most fun with is one that has Dragonfly in the third column and then Collective Action in the fourth column. I think that I would probably trade that out for Golden Tricorn if I could, but I have absolutely been enjoying using Dragonfly in that third column. But I would say that I'm also lucky because I got some decent stability on that roll, and this thing does need a little help in stability, especially if you're going to be using a perk like Dragonfly that needs some precision hits, Court, how about you? What are you thinking? Age-old Bond. We've finally got, updated, but still kind of new Void Auto Rifle. What are the vibes here?
So, again, this joins Transfiguration as a frame that I'm not terribly keen on. It's just not for me, these kind of lower fire rate auto rifles. And yeah, I'm going to wait for another weapon that gets repulsive brace and destabilizing rounds in different columns. I think that's what I would probably went for if I wanted to synergize. And yeah, you guys know that I use Void Hunter a lot, and having this repulsive brace and destabilizing rounds definitely closes out my Void Hunter build loops. But I'm probably not that interested with it being a high impact. It's too slow firing rate for me. Yes, it does hit hard, but I'm not that terribly keen on this type of frame. But yeah, a Collective Action's a nice one. I didn't mention Golden Tricorn, but Golden Tricorn is also on Age-Old Bond, and that's something that's kind of calling my name. It is definitely my, after the last couple of episodes, as we keep seeing Golden Tricorn, or at least we keep discussing weapons that have it, it's one of those perks that I just keep wanting to recommend all the time, and I know folks aren't that keen on it because it does require a little bit of a mini game system. Yes, you get that 7 seconds with 15% on just weapon kills, so it's kind of like half Rampage at stage 1, but that 50% as long as you can get those grenade and powered melee kills up to 10 seconds, it's great, potent damage buff. So that's probably just to play into the pluses of Age-Old Bond, and because it is a high impact, I would probably go into Golden Tricorn with either Stats for All or Discord, or even Fourth times the Charm. If I am hitting those crits, I think it would be a nice little pairing. Dragonfly as well, that's a nice little kind of pairing as well. But it's Golden Tricorn that would make me kind of craft this. Enhanced Golden Tricorn, I think it's just the first stack. It goes up to 8 seconds. It's a little bit longer,
right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's just the first stack. It's not the second one. It doesn't buff the second 50%. Did notice as well, yeah, Enhanced Dragonfly has that +5 reload. Enhanced Stats for All, it lasts 1 second longer. The effects reach 2 shots sooner with DSR. And we've already talked about Enhanced Fourth times the Charm. I think Collective Action is
more duration as well.
Yeah, right? I think it's 13 seconds, which is nothing to scoff at, to be honest.
Yeah.
For just 20% all the time in PvE. Target lock, I'm not interested in. I did put that in the script to kind of recommend, but for me, I think target lock appeals to me with faster fire rate weapons. We talked about the recurrent impacts machine gun from Season of the Seraph. It's the Void machine gun. Sorry, Retrofit Escapade. I'm talking about something else here.
Yeah.
That with target lock appeals to me a lot more than a slower fire rate weapon. So not interested in target lock. But yeah, very interesting perk combinations so far.
Yeah.
Any last comments here, Saint?
Well, I was just going to say, honestly, it's kind of funny because I still a little bit will find myself using Reckless Oracle. That is a rapid fire frame Void Auto Rifle. Now, that thing has Outlaw and Swashbuckler, which I would say is objectively worse than a combo like Even I like Discord a lot, but like even especially like Dragonfly and Golden Tricorn, I think that's definitely worse. But Rapid Fire Autos just put out really good damage per second as far as like primaries go, within the auto rifle family. So it's, even though I know it has worse traits, it can be kind of hard to get away from that sometimes.
Whenever we get Reckless Oracle and the rest of the Garden of Salvation weapons, craftable or at least redone with the perk pool, that's going to be a instant hit. Because I'm looking at the perk pool just now, and it's just like, could be better, but it's still a really good weapon with it being a rapid fire.
Yeah, you put that demo in the third column, and you put a damage trait in the fourth column, and we're off to the races. All right.
Oof.
All right, time to move on to our bow here. We have got Tyranny of Heaven. Tyranny of Heaven is a solar lightweight frame bow that's got a 580 millisecond draw time, and the frame bonus is we draw quicker, move faster. It's that same lightweight bonus plus 20 mobility, 2 tiers, and 6.25% forward movement speed. So classic lightweight bonus. It is a great frame bonus, probably one of the stronger ones, can't deny that. This is also the only non-sunset solar lightweight bow. So if we look at something like Tripwire Canary, it's probably a pretty close competitor from season 19. It's got some good stats. I would say I think Tyranny comes out on top here. Base of 36 accuracy versus 28 on Tripwire. 59 stability versus 54 on Tripwire, and then it's tied with 68 handling, and then also tied with 60 reload, and then finally 81 aim assist versus 72 on Tripwire Canary. So the raid weapon is beating out the seasonal weapon here. Seasonal weapons have usually pretty decent stack packages, but by all means, Tyranny is coming out on top. There are a few things that we can do with our strings, our bow strings, and our arrows. We are definitely looking to get that draw time down as much as possible, because more or less draw time is damage, is DPS, right? So elastic string is going to bring our draw time down from 580 milliseconds to just 500 milliseconds flat, which is going to be really nice, and you get a +5 handling, but we are losing 10 points to accuracy. Luckily, we could just choose something like straight fletching in our actual arrow, and that is going to give our +10 points to accuracy back. So now we have, all the buffs, no negations here. Really getting that draw time down is definitely going to be, my sought after point here. And then when we look into our main traits, we've got a couple other ways to get that draw time down and maybe add in some damage here. We have got in column 3, Archer's Tempo, Explosive Arrowhead, Dragonfly, and Successful Warm-Up, which it's interesting to see Successful Warm-Up in column 3. And then column 4, we have got a bunch of options: Golden Tricorn, Collective Action, Incandescent, Swashbuckler, One for All. A lot of damage traits here. I think that a couple of these are going to kind of outshine the others in terms of what I'm going to capitalize on a bow. Court, what are you looking for on your Tyranny of Heaven? Are you going to be using this thing?
Well, I was going to bring up Strident Whistle after after we were talking about it, but we might still talk about Strident Whistle now. We haven't mentioned Strident Whistle because it's a precision frame. So really, it's which frame do you prefer? Because I still think the +20 mobility and the forward movement speed bonus that you get from lightweights is a better kind of frame bonus compared to precision frame on Strident Whistle. But then it comes down to, okay, what do you want to forfeit? And well, I'm looking at the comparison between the two. Accuracy is 74 versus 36 of Tyranny. Tyranny's got some great stats everywhere else, and the recoil direction, I know it doesn't really apply with bows, but 76 versus 54. But precisions do more damage, relatively speaking, compared to Tyranny and lightweight bows. The big malice with Strident Whistle is, yes, it's a slightly older one. It's got the standard 12x12 because it's part of the Vanguard package of weapons. It too has Incandescent, which, is great. I think Strident Whistle, which I do have a great pairing, I can't remember which I have, But I do remember I did get an incandescent one, and I think I would still probably use Trident Whistle compared to Tyranny of Heaven. That's not saying, not to say that I won't use Tyranny of Heaven. This is another one that I haven't crafted fully yet, but it's got some really great damage perks compared to Trident Whistle, which was a bit kind of mixed, and Successful Warm-Up was in column 4, whereas Tyranny's got it in column 3. So that's a very interesting, do I want faster kind of draw speed here, or do I want to pair in Explosive Head, or do I want to go for Dragonfly plus Incandescent? I'm not sure how that combination works. If Dragonfly has any kind of intrinsic benefit on top of Incandescent, because when you defeat a target with Incandescent, or not active, but on the weapon, it does spread Scorch to those nearby targets. Will Dragonfly also kind of maybe expand on that? Will it cause Scorch to kind of send it out further than if it didn't have Dragonfly? Not sure. I would need to double check that. But yeah, to wrap things up, for my opinions with Tyranny, some really great perks, damage perks, Gold Tricorn on a bow, really nice to see. Collective action, another, just like Gold Tricorn, we see this on all the weapons that we've been talking about. It's one that I think is really great, especially on a solar subclass. One for All is also here as well, but it's not really that useful with a bow. You kind of need something that you can spray Hellfire compared to just pinging at targets with one shot. Not saying that you won't be able to get One for All to proc on a bow, but it's I think there's just better options.
Yeah.
But I don't know what I want to kind of go for. It's a very interesting combination. It's the last 3 plus Archer's Temple. So Explosive Head, Dragonfly, Successful Warm-Up, Archer's Temple, plus either Gold Tricorn, Collective, or Incandescent. I'm really not sure what one I want to go for, what pairing. Saint, you got anything that's kind of what you're looking out for?
Yeah, I got a couple Trident Whistles that I've held on to just doing Nightfalls, and a bunch of stuff like that. Like you get a lot of weapons just dropping randomly. And I think that the kind of like fun roll here would definitely be Dragonfly and Incandescent. It's like there are so many good traits in that third column, but getting away from Archer's Tempo is so difficult because it just gives you that. I mean, it just gives you that scalar, right? Scalars are just so good in this game. This is something that Lego and I were talking about. Any kind of trait that gives you a multiplier or scalar is usually going to be, just like a absolute top pick, more or less, because of the impact that it's going to have on your just amount of damage you can output. It's in this case, it's a 0.75 draw time multiplier, so that it's essentially just 25% increase there, which is really nice. And on the last column here, I think the collective action is less appealing because I'm not going to be very close if I'm using a bow. Bows have a lot of range. Even this bow is going to have a lot of range being a lightweight. And I think that's something that's interesting whenever you look at a chart that is describing, damage output. Like I reference Mossy's work all the time, right? If you're not following Mossy, you got to be following Mossy. And if you kind of take a look at the trend on weapon archetypes within weapons, you're going to see that usually as fire rate or as RPM goes up, the damage output of the weapon goes up. Now, there are exceptions to this, as far as like TPS trends go, but this is kind of like the general rule of thumb across weapon families. And obviously, like I said, there are some exceptions to this, but this is like a huge thing where bows break the trend, and lightweight frames, even with their lower draw time, right, or putting out less damage. So you got to have something to make up for it. And I think that not Successful Warm-Up, but Archer's Tempo and Gold Tricorn could do that. Explosive Payload is obviously good for champions if you're going to be going that way, like we were talking about. And maybe like Explosive Payload Incandescent would be fun for like a little bit of damage, a little bit of AoE kind of a thing. So man, it's trying. It is really doing all it can to make a lightweight bow break into our loadouts here, I think. And I'm looking at it thinking, I don't know what else they could do to this thing to try to make lightweight bows appealing, in this situation.
So you mentioned there about draw time here. So I'm looking at the, let's actually enhance these as well. So I'm looking at Archer's Tempo. So the buff duration goes up to 4 seconds. That's from 3 when you enhance it. And the draw time goes down to 395 milliseconds. With successful warm-up, however, it goes down to 330. So the big kind of comparison here is obviously Archer's Tempo just requires you to hit a precision shot. Pretty easy to do. You don't need to make a kill. Successful warm-up does need a kill to actually proc, but as long as you keep those sustained kills up, you can increase your duration with successful warm-up up to 20 seconds. So it starts off at 6 and it can go up to 20. And it adds, again, enhanced successful warm-up adds 5 seconds for each kill that you make. So that's the kind of trade-off. If you're more interested in like a damage bow, if you're more like to get those arrows downrange faster at maximum damage, it's the sort of comparison between, do you want something that's pretty easy, which is Archer's Tempo to proc, or are you confident enough to get those damage hits in to proc successful warm-ups? It's very, very interesting to see successful warm-up in the third column for a bow, when something like Archer's Tempo is just such a mainstay when it comes to any type of bow, including Leviathan's Breath, which has got its own Archer's Tempo for the catalyst,
which absolutely just makes that weapon. If you have not done the catalyst on Leviathan's Breath, I can't encourage you to grind it out enough, because good lord, what a difference that makes, man. Okay, Court, you want to take us in to our last primary of the day and our second to last energy weapon.
Yes, this is Nation of Beasts, which is a personal favourite of mine many, many years ago. Not so much now. I'm saying not so much now because I haven't used it a lot. But yes, my classic arc hand cannon from those Forsaken days has made a triumphant return. Yes, it's the Arc Adaptive Hand Cannon, 140 RPM. There's no bonus with adaptives. We have quite a selection of comparisons to make, which is kind of strange, considering a lot of the other weapons we're talking about here don't really have a lot of competitors. So we'll pick a few on the same slot. We'll stick to its raid competitor, which is Zalo's Bane from Kingsfall. We've got Season 19's Trials of Osiris Exalted Truth, which is the Void hand cannon. We've got Cantata 57, which is Arc. And of course, the Void Palindrome. And there's various other weapons. We've mentioned Garden of Salvation already. Ancient Gospel is there. Annual Skate and Awakened Vigilance. But those are all fairly older ones now. And there's no origin traits, so I don't think it's kind of fair to compare with those. So we have 40 range. It is actually worse out of the 5. Exalted Truth and Pally are best at 50. Again, you'll notice a trend here when it comes to Exalted Truth and Palindrome. 57 stability, which is actually the second best out of the 5. Exalted Truth and Pally are best joint at 58. 42 handling, which is worst out of the 5. Exalted Truth far out ahead with 55. 71 aim assistance, which is worst out of the 5. Cantata has the best at 82. And 95 recoil, which is joint second best. Palindrome, being the stat monster that it is, has 98. So it's fairly average up against the four other hand cannons here. Again, it highlights that Exalted Truth and Palindrome are stat monsters. Exalted Truth and Zalos and Nation of Beasts have access to elemental perks, so that's your Repulsive Race, Incandescent, and Volt Shot, respectively. Whereas Palindrome and Cantata do not. Palindrome no longer actively dropping, and Cantata is a world/foundry drop, so it is fairly difficult to come by now. And Exalted is a Trials exclusive, and obviously if you want the flawless, if you want the adept, you need to go flawless. So really it's Zalos, which is the sort of reliable adept drop if you're after one of those. But yeah, I think Nation of Beasts does make it up with some very interesting perk combinations. We've seen a few from other weapons make an appearance here that we've talked about. But let's start off with barrels and magazines. Barrels, really a personal preference, especially when a hand cannon. I know we don't use hand cannons a lot recently, but they are due for a buff very shortly. This is another kind of range versus stability because they are pretty close together, though I think stability and recoil direction are pretty high as standard anyway. So probably small bore or even extended barrel just to maximize the recoil direction up to 10 or plus with plus 10 range, but it does have that minus 10 handling. For the magazine, accurized rounds is always a great pick to get that plus 10 range. And for perks, well, let's have a look. So we've got Discord again, we've got Keep Away again, we've got Eddy Current. Now, we haven't talked about Eddy Current, but that is technically speaking, one of the elemental perks for this season. As a reminder that it's after sprinting for 3 seconds, increases your reload speed for 3 seconds, and the duration can be refreshed by tapping sprint, and being amplified increases this bonus. We don't know the exact numbers yet, but I've seen it being fairly potent, especially once you get that amplified bonus up. Mm-hmm. We have the classic combo of Dragonfly, and in the 4th slot we've got Explosive Payload. Kill Clip is also there. But back to column 3, Perk Motion makes an appearance here if you're interested in something like moving around, maybe something that to pair with the column 4 damage perk of Volt Shot. If you're, as an arc subclass, you should be moving around with Amplified a lot, so Perpetual Motion kind of plays into that hand quite well. But yeah, the other column 4 perks, we've got Collective Action again, we've got Golden Tricorn again, and I've already mentioned Explosive Payload and Volt Shot. So, Saint, what are you looking out for on Nation of Beasts?
I've got an obscene amount of kills on my classic curated Nation of Beasts, right? That outlaw Dragonfly. So looking at this thing, there's a lot of good options, and especially knowing where hand cannons are going to be at in just a few weeks. I think we'll kind of be talking about that more next week. But seeing the ability to replace my Outlaw with Explosive Payload and maybe invest into, just a little bit of reload speed elsewhere if I want to go for like a reload, masterwork kind of intrinsic. That's pretty appealing to me because it's just a weapon that I've enjoyed using for a long time, and now hand cannons are getting buffed up a little bit, and I'm seeing maybe even just like a slightly better version of this role that I've been using for a long time that I would really enjoy. I also I can't deny like Golden Tricorn and Volt Shot, right? I think that posterity is kind of going to be reserved as like the Volt Shot hand cannon. So then like Volt Shot Frenzy is what's on my posterity. So I think I'm going to keep that there, and I'm probably going to land on Dragonfly and either Explosive Payload or Golden Tricorn. Not exactly sure. We'll see, where I end up on that, but I feel like Golden Tricorn on Arc, obviously I play Titan. Arc Titan has such high ability uptime if you're queuing into things right with your punch and your Arc Grenade, that I feel like Golden Tricorn times 2 is not very hard to get up on that class. Court, how about you? You gonna be you going for a Volt Shot on this thing? Is it worth it? Well, are you a posterity guy or no?
I have, we raved about posterity all those episodes ago with the buff, or sorry, the revamp perk pool it got back then. I haven't really used a lot of posterity just because it's a hand cannon, it's a 180, but because Volt Shot is in the 3rd column, it makes Nation of Beasts with Volt Shot in the 4th column a very difficult choice, because having Volt Shot and Frenzy, as you mentioned, is a very potent pairing. Mm-hmm. And I think, generally speaking, 180s have a better time with damage output compared to other hand cannons. I don't have the Mossy's sheet up to do kind of a specific pairing comparison, but if I do remember correctly, I think 180s have a better multiplier across the board versus other hand cannons anyway. And obviously having Volt Shot and Frenzy to do some serious work with those multipliers is just such a great pairing. Having said that, if you don't have a posterity with that, if you haven't been doing a lot of Deep Stone Crypts, but you have been doing a lot of Last Wishes, the pairing that I was thinking of, depending on what the reload speed is, I think is a perfect pairing load, is Eddy Current and Volt Shot. Because you're reloading anyway, you're going to be reloading to proc Volt Shot, it's fair to just really hype up that reload speed. Again, we don't have specific numbers of what Eddy Current does, but from what I remember, seeing a few clips when Amplified is active, it is fairly potent, so you're going to get that Volt Shot up all the time. Obviously, pairing Volt Shot and Eddy Current with Amplified, and then the whole kind of builds that we've talked about in various episodes before when it comes to arc synergy is a really potent one. Having said that, as I've mentioned last week's episode and probably the week before that episode as well, Golden Tricorn with Arc is such a superb combo because it's so easy on all three classes. You've got very potent grades and all three classes some great powered melees to get that 50%. So for me, it's a toss-up between maybe giving Eddy Current and Volt Shot a little tryout. You've got the classic pairing of Dragonfly Explosive Payload, but we've seen that before with other weapons. And then you've got the power build with Golden Tricorn. So we'll see. I'll probably craft the Golden Tricorn one out first and then craft another one with Eddy Current and Volt Shot just to see how well that pairs. But yeah, as you said, Posterity with Volt Shot in column 3 and Frenzy in column 4 it's a tough one to beat out. Very tough one to beat out.
I will say I do really enjoy the fact that while maybe it's kind of resource expensive crafting, and once I've gotten this leveled up, it does afford you the opportunity to be like, what would Golden Tricorn feel like? And just swapping that out and playing for, 2 or 3 hours with Golden Tricorn instead, and swapping that around, or saying, what if Keep Away was in my slot instead of Eddy Current, and kind of just doing some experimentation there when, you just haven't been able to land a roll like that. So I gotta say, as somebody like us, we're like reviewing weapons here, man, crafting is such a send, just in terms of experimentation, it's awesome. Also, you just mentioned, and I mentioned this a couple weapons ago as well, the hand cannon buffs, right? And we've referenced Mossy's chart, so I pulled up the chart here, and I'm just going to give a couple numbers for context before we move on to our next weapon, our last energy weapon. After the upcoming buff, so this is anticipatory. This is looking towards the futures. A little bit of guessing here, but kind of using current numbers and what the projected buffs are. Our hand cannons are going to be landing really high up. So I'm going to, just for context on this, let's talk about adaptive sidearms. Sidearms are very high and super limited by their range, right? But they've got really high DPS output generally. So adaptive sidearms are at 368 damage per second. This is under just like Gambit scaled enemies. Because it creates for really easy numbers for comparison. So again, 368 is kind of like middle for the sidearms there. And then our aggressive, adaptive, and precision hand cannons are going to be doing 298, 335, and 361 DPS respectively. So those 180 hand cannons are going to be like easily, well into sidearm territory, with your 140s kind of on the door there, and then your aggressive hand cannons still very high, beating out the damage output of a lot of your other, just kind of scout rifles, auto rifles, pulse rifles type of a deal in the general primary slot. So incredibly strong, incredibly high potential for damage output on these things, especially when you stack up, Golden Tricorn or something like that. It's going to be obscenely high damage going out for a primary weapon like this, considering the amount of range that this thing has at base is around 30 meters versus sidearms that force you to get to like half that, All right. That's enough gushing about the hand cannon hype. Let's jump into our last energy weapon, our second to last weapon here. We have got Techeun Force. This is a arc adaptive frame fusion, 660 millisecond charge time. There's no frame bonus here. It's just adaptive, kind of rounded stats. This is the only sunset adaptive, non-sunset adaptive arc fusion. So if we're going to compare in the same slot, Royal Executioner from Season 20, and then Trinary Star System is a Gambit playlist weapon that's been around for a long time. So this is going to be, having some pretty good stats, starting off with 39 range. This is the joint highest with Trinary, and the Royal Executioner could be at 31. 39 stability is right in the middle there, 43 and 35 for Trinary and Royal Executioner. 34 reload again is in the middle, 39 to 32. 44 aim assist is in the middle. 60 recoil direction is going to be the best, which is not something we can completely ignore on a fusion rifle the way that burst. And then 39 stability is going to be in the middle again. So, man, Trinary Star System is an absolute stat monster. We've talked about this once before, I think, when talking about solar fusion rifles, but especially for a playlist weapon, the thing is nutty. But the Techeun Force remains competitive despite the fact that it is not the stat monster maybe that Trinary Star System is. And also, you can craft this thing versus one of those 12x12 loopholes we were talking about with some of the other Vanguard weapons, Stride and Whistle. It's much easier to get what you're looking for in this thing rather than farming Gambit resets and hoping eventually you get lucky. Lego, I'm looking at you because I know you've been feeling the pain with Trinary System. We were just talking about that. Just real quick on the barrels and mags, probably going arrowhead break. We mentioned recoil directions at 60, and even though that is the best out of this grouping that we've been looking at, we probably do want to crank that up a little bit just to make sure that even at a range, we are able to land all of our bolts easily. And then on the battery side, aka mag, probably looking at liquid coils. Enhanced battery isn't really needed with some of the other traits we've got here, which I'll say we've got a lot of really good ammo traits. Jumping into our main columns here. Envious Assassin, Rewind Rounds, Reconstruction, all in column 3, and then we keep things going in column 4 with Collective Action, Controlled Burst, and Golden Tricorn. Man, a pretty hot looking perk set here. I know, Court, you have in quotes here the Lego LaFlash roll, like we were just joking about our man that is hunting a Trinary System. What is the Lego roll here?
Yeah, well, it's Rewind Rounds and Control Burst. He recommended it on his Techeun Force video at the start of the season. He considers it as one of the best fusion rifles in the game. Like, this is S plus tier, and I have to agree. Like, this is like, there's not been I think there's been a fair amount of talk about this ARC fusion rifle, but I think a lot of folks have been talking about the other weapons compared to this one, and honestly, like, this is just such a great fusion rifle, regardless of what perks you're picking. Because adaptives just are really great. They're jack of all trades. Sure, they're not the master of one particular stat, but they get the job done. And I think for me, who finally did get his iterative loop, this
nice.
Kind of end of last, well, it was the end of last season, but it took a while for that to drop to then see this drop. I'm like, well, I'm just going to craft this and maximize its potential. Yeah, you mentioned some perks here, and they're all juicers. I mean, even I know Lego, he mentioned on his video that Kill Clip plus, say, like Golden Tricorn isn't necessarily a great pairing because it doesn't synergize well. Like, Kill Clip requires you to reload. You've only got it up for so many seconds, and Golden Tricorn obviously requires that in a two-step process to get that 50% damage. But like, I'm just like, Envious Assassins here. Rewind Rounds is probably your best option if you are going to go for that Control Burst option. But Reconstruction is also here. Like, they've just put all the reload perks in this, the really great reload perks, and then some solid damage perks like Collective Action, a 20% damage increase if you're playing into the whole Ionic Traces. It doesn't have to be Ionic Traces, it can be anything, but obviously if you're pairing it to your Arc subclass, there you go. I'm not a big fan of Backup Plan, but it's there. You've got a decreased charge time, but also decreased damage, which isn't that great. Maybe not so much. Its malice is not that. I wouldn't say it's not noticeable in PvE, but when you've got stuff like Collective Action, which is just a 20% damage increase, or Control Burst, which is also a 20% damage increase, but also a 10% decreased charge time with no malice whatsoever, and then you've got Golden Tricorn here as well, and even Kickstart, if you want like all these 20% damage bonuses, pick whichever one that plays into your playstyle. Do you slide a lot after sprinting? Kickstart. Do you use your abilities a lot? Golden Tricorn. Do you just shoot a lot? Controlled Burst. Do you spawn a lot of Ionic Traces? Collective Action. You have a lot of choices here, and I will absolutely echo Lego's role of Rewind Rounds and Controlled Burst. It is such a machine. And I recommend watching his video as well if you haven't already. Just a really quick note here. Control Burst will still activate even if it's just one of the bolts in the burst that kills. So the actual text box that talks about Control Burst, landing every shot in a burst grants this weapon increased damage and reduced charge time. That is true if you don't kill something, but if one of the bolts in the burst of a fusion rifle kills, you'll still get Control Burst activate. Which is something Lego also mentioned in his video. But yeah, some juicer rolls here. Saint, you got any other comments here?
Yeah, it's funny you mention that because I am kind of a big iterative loot guy. I've got Compulsive Reloader Volt Shot crafted on that guy, and it's a lot of fun. Fusions have a great multiplier, and I do really enjoy that. So this is not direct competition, though, because I'm like, okay, I've got Iterative Loop. That's great. I've got the whole Compulsive Reloader Volt Shot, and that's definitely like a very specific kind of playstyle for the Fusion. And the thing does not have crazy range. I think both of these are sitting around 15, 16 meters, which is pretty good. You probably put this thing up to about 17. But yeah, I also really like just reconstruction because I'm probably going to be not using this thing constantly, even if I'm using double special. I'm going to be putting it away for a little bit and having reconstruction put me up to 12 in the mag or something like that. And then I can just swap over for Control Burst, which I would agree is it's pretty easy to activate Controlled Action, but Control Burst getting you the compounding benefit of damage increase and the charge time reduction. It just lets you swap to this weapon and kind of shred through a crowd of enemies, even red bars, yellow bars, your lower, your middling enemies. With Control Burst, you can kind of just tear up a crowd. And when you're landing those consecutive shots, I know Control Burst is a perk that doesn't sound like it's lasting that long. I think Enhance similarly will give Control Burst just a little bit more time, maybe 2.5 seconds instead of 2 seconds. I'm not exactly sure what that's. That we don't have exact numbers on that, but you can just tear through a crowd with that trait, and it's so much fun.
It looks the part as well. I know people comment about Techeun Force. It doesn't look like its peers, but when you look at the front of it, it's just got that big gaping wide open mouth, and it's just like, feed me with all these enemies, and it's like, yes, you will, because it is an absolute machine. And yeah, I think I was going to make the comment without realizing this was our second last, but I was going to make the point of Apex Predator, which is our last. We've saved the last till we've saved the best till last, but really we've saved the best two till last. Yeah. Okay. Let's crack on with
this
Apex
is such a big one. Is this is it Cold Comfort? Is it Apex Predator? Court, what is my penultimate rocket meta, or my ultimate rocket meta, I should say? What's going on here?
Right, so it's Apex Predator, which is the Solar Adaptive Rocket Launcher. Just a reminder that it's 50.5 RPM in game. The rate of fire is not correct, so 50.5. There's no frame bonus, but with it being a rocket launcher, adaptives have the 1.1x damage profile, which is same as aggressives. It's 10% more than high impacts and 21% more than precision. So last week we talked about Braytech Osprey. That is a high impact, so Braytech is immediately doing 10% less damage than Apex Predator. But it does do the same damage as Cold Comfort, which we talked about in a previous episode. So this is intrinsically average stats, and again, it's jack of all trades, but it's master of none. So versus its peers. So I've compared it with Hothead and Red Herring. It doesn't really have a kind of direct solar competitor that's on the same damage frame. So 50 blast radius, that's the exact same for the others. 49 velocity, which is actually the lowest. Hothead has 57 and 53 for Red Herring. 44 handling, which is middling. Hothead has 57 and 40 for Red Herring. 44 reload, which again, middling. It's one less than Hothead's 45, but two more than 42. Red Herring's 42. So it's stat-wise, you can see why everyone keeps talking about Hothead. It is a stat monster, but it's it's a very close kind of competitor between all three of these, plus Cold Comfort. So much like other adaptive rocket launchers, this is pretty standard and average. Hothead is comparably a stat machine, but it isn't craftable, and you can only get the normal version now. You cannot get the adept variant. That's no longer dropping. You can't focus for it. And Red Herring has access to the coveted enhanced field prep for that crazy ammo efficiency, whereas Apex Predator has access to some amazing perks. So let's have a look at kind of comparison here between the reserves and the magazine. So Apex Predator at base level, this doesn't roll field prep, so we won't pair it with the field prep and enhanced field prep comparisons here. So at base it's 7, with 1 reserve it's 8, and then at 2 and 3 reserves it's 9. So you cannot get that elusive, very coveted 10 ammo. Total ammo capacity. His Vengeance can. Red Herring can. Bump in the Night can. What other adaptives that can do it? Let's have a look. We have... Actually, I don't think any of the adaptives... Oh, no, sorry. Red Herring is an adaptive. Cold Comfort. Again, this is an aggressive, so it's not really fair to pair it with, other than it's the same damage profile. We talked about this before, but that does go up to 10 at 3 reserves. Yeah. So again, it's pretty average even when it comes to ammo capacity. We'll take a quick kind of break to talk about barrels and magazines here. So really, it's two rabbit holes that you want to sort of dive down here. Do you want to go handling, or do you want to go velocity? If you want to go the handling spec, so if you're kind of hot swapping between many kind of weapons here, you want to go for quick launch. And if you're going for the velocity spec, you want to go for hard launch instead. The magazine stat here you want, impact casing, is just too good to pass up. Alloy casing isn't really necessary here, as we aren't building into a reload-centric rocket launcher. If this had climb cartridge or some sort of kind of reload perk, then yeah, we'd absolutely want to go down the alloy casing point here instead of impact. But we don't have that. In terms of the main perks here, we've got tracking module, we've got demo, we've got reconstruction, and we've got slideways. And for column 4, we've got frenzy, we've got collective action, we've got surrounded, we've got explosive light, and we've got bait and switch. So what a collection of traits, Saint. So this selection makes it one of the best rockets in the game for damage focus builds. It's very close. This is, from what I've looked at and my personal preference, it's extremely close with Cold Comfort. And I am really enjoying this whole kind of back and forth kind of tug of war between Apex and Cold Comfort, because they've both got their pros and their cons. Obviously, Cold Comfort's got the whole synergy with Envious Assassin, plus its origin trait.
What do you call it? Ritual, right?
Restoration Ritual.
Yeah.
So it's very tight compared to Apex, which doesn't have that, but does have reconstruction. It doesn't need any fancy, I have to kill X amount of enemies to get the 3 in the magazine. It just works, just works behind the scenes. It just does its job. I'm ready to have that double magazine. But it's the damage perks, which are just like, ooh, we've got explosive light and bait and switch. Those are your big ones. So what are you feeling, Saint? What's your vibes?
I think I think that there is like a very interesting caveat here that you mentioned about Wolfpack rounds that is definitely going to kind of like shape this decision. Well, first of all, I'll mention Explosive Light as the ability to be enhanced here, whereas on, like Cold Comfort, you can't get enhanced Explosive Light. That is going to be 7 rockets instead of 6 by default, making it a little bit easier to ensure that every single rocket that you fire off in a DPS phase is going to have that buff. And any way that we can ensure we have a higher uptime on our better buffs, the better. And then, Bait and Switch has that 35% to offer, but there's some Wolfpack round interaction we got to consider here, because Wolfpack rounds is such a contributor to the rocket launcher kind of damage meta, and damage phases your total damage output. Bipod, Collective Action, Bait and Switch, and Surrounded are all going to have a impact on this, whereas Explosive Light is not. So Bipod will have the same 40% reduction. Ouch. Can't wait to hear what's happening to that in the mid-season patch, hopefully. Collective Action gets its full 20%. Bait and Switch gets its 35%. And then Surrounded, it gets kind of weird. I think Rock did some testing on this. So, shout out our man Rock DC from Reddit. Mr. Rock DC from Reddit, to those of you who are looking him up. Wolfpack round... little explosions also do explosive and impact damage, just like a rocket launcher does explosive and impact damage. Surrounded is giving that 35% increase to Wolfpack round explosion damage, but not their impact damage, which is like a 24% increase in total damage. So kind of right in between Collective Action, Bait and Switch, but Surrounded definitely working if you're able to capitalize on that with Enhanced Surrounded, obviously being an obscene amount of damage increase. Now, I think... Court, I'll pass it back to you here, because I think that there's a way that you can set up Cold Comfort better for one damage trait, and maybe Apex here is better for another damage trait. What are you putting on your Apex Predator, and why? And I'm interested to see if we kind of align here.
So for me, it really It really comes down to how both rockets kind of pair with their respective damage perks. Now, the reason why I suggested Cold Comfort to have Bait and Switch over Apex Predator having Bait and Switch is because the way Envious Assassin works, and then the way the Origin trait works, you're basically going to expend all those rockets during that Bait and Switch period. You'll have enough time to kind of reload and just do it again, and do a couple more kind of swaps. But when it comes to being able to craft and enhance Explosive Light, as you've already said, you get that another stack of Explosive Light. Now, there is a fair bit more reloading going on here, because you can only get 2 in the magazine for Apex Predator compared to the 3 that Cold Comfort is. But it just comes down to Explosive Light just feels a lot more comfortable to use on something like Apex Predator, and which is why I mentioned the whole kind of, do you want to go the velocity route, or do you want to go the handling route? And for handling, you're obviously speccing to quick launch, and then impact casing doesn't do anything for your launch, but it's a damage increasing one here. And then you've got various other kind of abilities and exotics that can buff up your handling and your ADS speed and that. So that's why when it comes to Apex Predator, I think Explosive Light is just the better pairing with Reconstruction. Cold Comfort, we've already mentioned this in that episode a few episodes ago. That's the one. Sure, you can't craft anything there, you don't get enhanced benefits, but if you do manage to get a Bait and Switch roll, it's a much more comfortable weapon perk combination with Envious Assassin and then Restoration, Ritual, Origin trait to get the best out of it. There's less reloading, meaning you can benefit from Bait and Switch more, whereas Explosive Light here, it just works off in the background. Unless you die, which you do lose all your stacks of Explosive Light, they're just there for when you do use them. You don't have a timer to race against that Bait and Switch does.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you there, and it's, looking at the timers, it's great that bait and switch enhances gives me 11 instead of 10, so it's like I slightly have more time, maybe to get one more rocket off, but I definitely agree with the whole just capitalizing on Restoration Ritual and leaning in bait and switch on the Cold Comfort, and then going in for the explosive light with the 7 explosive light sacks here. I can still, on the other hand, like on the other column, I can get the reconstruction, but it's just not quite the same as Envious Assassin when it comes to like the true utility. Once you have that full understanding of how to get the 3 shots loaded up, swap over to Cold Comfort, get those shots loaded in, do a finisher, go into the DPS phase. Yeah, it takes more effort, but man, does it put out some insane burst and just overall DPS whenever you get it worked up. You could go and, enhance reconstruction or at least enhance bait and switch on this thing. If you just get tired of farming the dungeon and you can't land what you want, you could still make that work here, especially if you are working with a warlock who's kind enough to throw on maybe some Lunafaction boots for you and help you with your reload speed a little bit there. But otherwise, I'm probably going reconstruction explosive light just so that I can make sure that I have a couple shots to get a little bit of better burst DPS right at the beginning of the phase with like some impact casing. Yeah, I don't know. So great, and I think it's like, would you rather have the guaranteed one that is very good, or farm for the one that has the potential with a little more work to be, even better with the bait and switch? It really is hard to say who the winner is here, but my mind can't ignore the way that bait and switch is affecting the Wolfpack rounds on top of the damage of the rocket itself. So I feel like, I don't know if I can finally manage to land that perfect Cold Comfort with the bait and switch, and I'm going to be in like a raid environment where I'm using rockets. It's going to be very tempting to not pick that thing over my Apex Predator. But again, if you can get 5%, 98% is close with a craftable weapon here, so both very valuable in my eyes.
I will say as well, so tracking module is in the third column slot, which is par for the course when it comes to rocket launchers that aren't precisions. I've warmed up to tracking module as time has moved on, because we don't really have a lot of bosses that are static now. Yeah, we've still got the odd kind of one or two that are kind of just sat on their pedestal and we just shoot up. Mm-hmm. But as we get more bosses that are moving around, they're more squirrely, they kind of teleport everywhere. I'm thinking the dungeon boss, if you don't immediately stun her. Yeah. Tracking module is your best friend here, and I would take that over reconstruction any day. Enhanced tracking module doesn't do anything other than +5 radius, which is irrelevant when you've got explosive light active. The other pairing here is depending on how bipod works. Remember, bipod does give you that +1 in the magazine as well, plus increased total reserves. And I'll just look at my sheet here. So Apex Predator with reconstruction plus bipod goes up to 4. With bipod and reserve mods, it goes to 12, 13, 14, 14. It's just a +5 to whatever the base values are. So at 2 reserves plus bipod, you get 14 rockets. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because I'm thinking of demo plus bipod. Depending on what they do to bipod is the kind of the crux of this big if. Yeah. So demo plus bipod might be a kind of pseudo clown cartridge roll. We haven't seen clown cartridge on a rocket launcher for some time now, so that would be your kind of hot swapping. Throw out your grenade, and we don't necessarily have those kind of builds much anymore, but that would be a kind of a small scale build to pair demo plus bipod. And a quick note before we kind of wrap things up here. So Surrounded, I thought would be pretty exciting for this rocket launcher. And to be honest, it is in a way, but it's got some weirdness. It's the same with grenade launchers surrounded on grenade launchers. So it's a unique sight to see in a rocket launcher. And it's fairly easy to proc. Again, I'm thinking of the dungeon. You can get those thralls to kind of come near you and kind of proc the damage perk. How it works on the rocket launchers is that you get 40% increased damage to impact and 35% increase to explosive. So that gives you a 36.1% total damage increase. And if you enhance it, it does go up to 47% and 41.75% respectively, which is a 45.8% total damage increase. So it's a very large damage increase. The only problem is Surrounded can be just a little bit of a pain to proc and keep procced. So that's why we haven't mentioned Surrounded. Yes, it's almost, it's 10.8% more damage than Bait and Switch, but it's just got a lot of these asterisks attached where it's like you have to be close to other enemies, and it doesn't really play well with Wolfpack rounds. And just go for Explosive Light, which it doesn't play well with it doesn't play with Wolfpack rounds at all, but it's still a net gain. You still get a large damage bonus. Bait and Switch with Wolfpack rounds getting its 35% on top of that, and the Wolfpack rounds is crazy damage. But as we've been saying, I still think Cold Comfort has a much better avenue of like burst damage when it comes to pairing with Bait and Switch, and Explosive Light is better attached to Apex Predator. We'll see. Like this went from absolute zero to hero, and love to see it, because Apex Predator was just like, this thing is useless. I'm sorry, but it was just not good. I
think it had, like, the best roll you could get before this was, like, tracking auto-loading holster. Man, that's tough.
Let me pull up the old roll, see if it's still
While
in
you're doing that, I'll
database.
just say that I'm totally with you that tracking module, like, in place of something like fuel prep, tracking module really does offer a strong benefit, because, like, even if you're decently close, like, a missed rocket's no damage, and that's going to kill your damage output, right? Missing an entire rocket is absolutely brutal, which is one of the reasons they're so punishing. And Surrounded is interesting. It's obscenely high damage buff, but I feel that I'm much more comfortable using it on Briars than I am with a rocket launcher, because I'm going to blow myself up, frankly. That's just the reality of where I'm at. But
that's the big kind of problem with Surrounded. So the old roll was just a 3x3, so it was tracking module, Ambitious Assassin, and Genesis in the third column, and snapshot sights, kill clip, and auto loading holster. So I mean, you've got
snapshot sights.
Auto loading holster is in the wrong column.
Yeah. Tough. That was not a shining star, but now it is, and now it's like the best rocket in the game that you can craft. So, yeah, agreed, Court. What an improvement.
Great rocket launcher. See if I've got any more notes here. Yeah, so Masterwork, again, really depends on handling or velocity, and of course the weapon mod you want to go for is boss spec or major if you're using it against champions. Let me just double check here. So it was Slideways, yeah. So just a quick note on Slideways. This might be an interesting pairing. I've not played around with this. So Slideways, on how it works, is it refills 15% of the magazine. For rocket launchers, this is just always going to round up to 1. So you'll whenever you slide, you'll get that 1 back. It does give that 20 handling for 3 seconds as well. So that might be an interesting pairing, Slideways with Explosive Light. But it's just one of those, like, juicer of rocket launchers. You've got a lot of pairings and potential pairings in the future. Whatever bipod gets, wherever that lands with the sort of rework, whatever you want to call it.
If Slideways was slide shot, I'm there.
Yeah,
but it's the dang cooldown, man.
Yeah,
it's too long for me, and I'm totally with you that I read the description and I'm like, oh man, it's like ignition code vibes back on the menu, but it's just not quite there with the cooldown. But it would be such an interesting loop if that was it. I would absolutely be very funny to see a meta where everybody is just fighting Rolk and they're shooting and sliding and shooting and sliding and shooting. I could get into that, you know?
Oh boy, well, I think that's it. Just a few kind of quick comment from Impetus left at the end of the script here. He said he hasn't seen a raid weapon set this strong since Vault of Glass. Excellent refresh that should hopefully get more folks into the most iconic D2 raid. That is a very great point to end the episode on. All right, let's wrap things up. That is it for episode 69. We've talked a lot about Last Wish weapons this week. So let us know what you've been chasing, crafting, and what you've been using this season. What's come from the Last Wish raid. Big thanks to patrons, sponsors, and of course you, the listener. Special shout out to Massive Breakdown's editor, Nettie, for editing this week's episode while Otto has been on a break. Next week, we'll be discussing, I think the mid-season patch is due to come out during the week, so we'll hopefully get on top of that. And plus, we want to do one of our curated subjects or topics, which is a PvE weapon meta discussion. So finally get to talk about something that we've been putting off for a long time, just to get some kind of discussion going on and see where our kind of thoughts align or disalign with the PvE weapon meta. Until then, my name is Court, and you can find me over on Twitter and Discord as Court Projects. You can find my infographics and spreadsheets over on the Destiny Massive Breakdowns website, along with other spreadsheets and applications to enhance your Destiny experience. Saint, where can we find you?
Yep, my name is Saint Kabr. You can find me by Saint_Kabr on Twitter and Discord, as long as Twitter continues to function as a website. And be sure to follow at Destiny Massive Breakdowns for all updates about the show, scheduling, all kinds of stuff like that, and check the Discord for any updates. Thanks for listening to another episode of PvE.